So let's talk about the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, and more specifically, the recent overhaul that was announced in early October, just a little over a month and a half ago. So what we're going to talk specifically about in our discussion this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you are, what exactly is public service loan forgiveness, and how does it impact you as a student loan borrower or a qualifying employer? What we also want to do here is really highlight the three types of borrowers that exist in the marketplace today when it comes to the public service loan forgiveness program and working for a qualifying employer, because not everyone that has student loan debt working full-time for a qualifying employer qualifies for the public service loan forgiveness program. So we want to help you decide if in fact you're meeting some of the requirements for the program, if you're actually a candidate based on its specific requirements. So we're going to talk about PSLF before the overhaul. Some of you may have been pursuing this program and learned that you were more eligible or eligible at all because of the overhaul. So what did things look like before, and how did things change in October when they announced the overhaul and PSLF waiver? We're going to talk a little bit about some of the processes that are required to pursue or maximize public service loan forgiveness, such as employment certification. I'm going to share also some utilization data, meaning how many people in the country are actually pursuing this program? What is the value? And then what are some legislative components to this that we need to be on the lookout for? There's a calculator available. Some of you may have done this before through other resources. We have a very detailed one specific to what is my PSLF salary boost, meaning if I can save money on my student loans working for a qualified employer, how much money is that over what time frame, and how does that impact the benefit, at least economically, of me working for a qualified employer versus one who is not qualified for PSLF. So we're going to do that through some case studies. And then we're going to talk about the CARES Act and some of the other involving legislative things that we've seen in the marketplace. There will always be, as leadership and administrations evolve, changes to federal student loan legislation. One of the things you guys should take solace or comfort in is the fact that the programs that are available to you today, such as public service loan forgiveness, are actually in your master promissory notes. And it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for the government to take away these savings opportunities or your action plan that you've chosen, because you could certainly make the case that you made decisions about going to school and where you worked based on the availability of these programs. And so whether things change in the future dramatically or not at all, you should take solace in the fact that there's a lot of protections around the programs that are available to you today, again, like public service loan forgiveness, that should inspire you or motivate you to continue to pursue them with comfort. We'll answer some questions along the way and at the end as well, and talk to you about some available resources that we have as well. We ultimately want this to be educational in terms of a resource to you, and we encourage you to share our education with your peers, within your networks, with your colleagues that you've graduated from school with, within your organization, if it's PSLF qualified, as detailed advice and advocacy around PSLF is little available in the marketplace today. So what's public service loan forgiveness? This is a federal program. So it's, in other words, it's funded by the federal government. It's not funded by your employer. If you're a nonprofit or PSLF qualified employer, it doesn't come out of their balance sheet. It's ultimately funded by the government. This was created by an act of Congress called the College Cost Reduction and Access Act of 2007. So it was created like 14 years ago. So we'll talk a little bit about how things have evolved over time since then. But tax-free loan forgiveness is ultimately granted to anyone who works full-time for a qualifying employer for 10 cumulative years if they've made qualifying payments on qualifying loans. So those last two components have been the sticky part in years past that were ultimately addressed by the recent Overhaul. And we'll get into the details of this here as we talk about qualifying for PSLF. So let's break down those three core requirements of PSLF here now. How do I qualify for public service loan forgiveness? The first component is you have to have qualifying loans. Now, your loans must be direct federal student loans, meaning they come from the Department of Education. This is a pretty easy qualification standard for recent borrowers, those who went to school at accredited institutions on or after July 1st of 2010. So yes, we're talking about 11 plus years ago. Any student loan that you took out, a Stafford loan or a Grad Plus loan, for those of you who have graduate degrees or went to graduate school, those loans were called direct loans. They came from the Department of Education and then were serviced by one of a number of federal student loan contracted servicers. The main names are Great Lakes, Nelnet, Navient, and Fed Loans. Those are the four main servicers for federal student loans today. But they're not your lender. They are your loan servicer. They are not your lender. Your lender is the Department of Education. That is true if your loan says direct in front of it, and that's going to be everyone who took out federal student loans on or after July 1st of 2010. If you took out a federally regulated student loan prior to July 1st of 2010, that very likely was an FFEL, Family Federal Education Loan, FFEL. Those loans are federally regulated. They were lent by private lenders participating in the federal environment for student loans before the nationalization of student loans. And those loans on a standalone basis are not eligible for public service loan forgiveness. They function very much like Perkins loans, which also are not standalone eligible for public service loan forgiveness. But those types of loans can be consolidated into a direct consolidation loan and become eligible for PSLF. The waiver made this a lot easier because now any payments you made on those previously unqualified loans, even if you did not consolidate them, now also count. We'll get into the details of that as we get into this discussion, but suffice it to say, qualifying loans today are any federal student loan, whether it was lent to you prior to July of 2010 or it was lent to you on or after July of 2010. Those loans that were lent to you prior to that date, you do need to take action on them for them to continue to be qualified for public service loan forgiveness. The second component, after you know you've had qualifying loans, is to be in a qualifying repayment plan. This is also relatively simple going forward. You need to be using a federal income-driven loan repayment plan. At other types of repayment plans, and definitely forbearance and deferment, the election of not paying on your student loans for payment relief, those are not qualifying repayment plans unless you were in the military. And that's true for the waiver, the PSLF overhaul, not going forward. But a qualifying repayment plan in terms of the plan that best drives savings for PSLF, that's going to be an income-driven repayment plan. There are 5 of those available in the marketplace today. There's really 3 that most borrowers should be choosing between, and we'll get into that sort of decision tree here shortly. And then the third component is you need to work full-time for a qualifying employer. Most of the questions I get around the employment qualification relate to, does it need to be consecutive or with the same employer? The answer to both of those questions is no. I've spent the majority of the last 11 years working with medical schools through financial aid offices and deans of student services and affairs around educating graduates who have really high levels of student loan debt and go into residency and fellowship where incomes are modest and debt levels are high, typically above $200,000 or $300,000 for medical graduates. And so using the income-driven repayment plans was not just economically viable, but also a necessity, because most individuals making $50,000 to $55,000 a year in residency or fellowship can't afford $3,000 and $4,000 a month payments on their student loans. So payment relief was necessary. And that may be true for many of you on this call today. In fact, a lot of PSLF candidates are using an income-driven repayment plan because it's the most affordable plan for them and don't even know that they're actually qualifying time towards public service loan forgiveness. We certainly want to help you guys figure that out if you're one of those profiles on this call today. So working full-time for a qualifying employer does require that you work full-time. How they define full-time is an average of 30 hours per week for at least 8 months in a given year, unless your employer has a different requirement of full-time, in which case their definition would apply. But the minimum requirement for this program, if you don't have it stated in your employment agreement or otherwise, is 30 hours per week for at least 8 months in a given year. Just want to cover available or qualified loan types again. So federal student loans are going to be, the majority today we see are Stafford and Grad Plus loans. They're direct if you took them out on or after July 1st of 2010. If you took out federal student loans before then, it's possible they're FFEL loans. You want to identify that. I'll talk about action plan here later, and consolidate those loans within the next 11 months. That'll be part of the overhaul. And then if you have Perkins loans, they're actually eligible too. If you've been making payments on Perkins loans and meeting the other requirements for PSLF, those payments do now count towards PSLF, though you will want to consolidate those loans within the next 11 months also. Just a note on private loans: if you've taken out institutional loans or loans from credit unions or banks to fund your education, but they were not educational qualified loans, these loans are not eligible for public service loan forgiveness, nor can they be consolidated into a loan that's eligible for public service loan forgiveness. This would also be true of loans that have been refinanced. So if you took your loans to a SoFi or a Credible or your local bank and took your 6% interest down to a private loan that had 2 or 3% interest, which is possible in this marketplace if you're able to go into repayment on those loans, those types of loans are not PSLF eligible. You can't reverse the course of private loans and make them federal again. So any private loans that you have need to identify your own specific repayment strategy for those types of loans. Now, when it comes to maximizing public service loan forgiveness, we've created a decision tree to help you figure out what kind of savings is available, what's the best income-driven repayment plan to utilize to maximize public service loan forgiveness savings. And from here, we'll get into some case studies and show you guys the real numbers here that apply. Suffice it to say, if I'm to simplify this, of the 5 income-driven repayment plans that are available today, if you're single, you should be using revised pay-as-you-earn. Repay is the acronym for this, shown in this box here under the decision tree. So if you're single and PSLF is going to be available to you at all, you want to use revised pay as you earn. The reason we suggest this program, and I won't get deep into the details or nuances of this isn't a financial presentation more than it is a strategic student loan one, although financial analysis is important in a complex student loan environment today. That's why we exist. But suffice it to say, if you're single, revised pay as you earn has the lowest required payment based on your income of any of the income-driven repayment plans. So we want to minimize the payment to maximize savings. It also has an interest benefit, which states that anytime your payment isn't covering all of your accruing interest, only half of that interest is charged to you. So that can be substantial savings for those who have unfavorable debt to income ratios years into their career. So we prefer stopping the bleeding of interest that's accrued while you're pursuing public service loan forgiveness, because public service loan forgiveness does have a 10-year cumulative requirement. Again, it doesn't need to be consecutive or all with the same employer. Doctors, as an example, can do residency for 3 years, fellowship in a different place for another 3 years, and then go practice in a nonprofit hospital for 4 years. That's 3 different employers that they've certainly worked full time. They can apply for the public service loan forgiveness after the 10 cumulative years, and they want to make sure that they're making the smallest payments along the way to maximize available savings when that's appropriate for them. If they're single along the way, we would have suggested they use revised pay as you earn all the way through. Now, those who are married have a different strategic consideration. So if your spouse's income is non-existent, i.e. you're the sole breadwinner in your household, or your spouse's income is less than $20,000 per year, you can still consider yourself ultimately single. In other words, the 10% of your discretionary income required from revised pay as you earn wouldn't change the payment that much from when you're using your entire household income. With a spousal income of $20,000 or less. You can also claim all of the dependents in your household if you have children or dependents, such that the discretionary income, which is what these payments are based on, becomes smaller with larger family sizes based on your income. So you can still use revised pay as you earn if your spouse is earning $20,000 or less in income. That's normally what we suggest. Therefore, that's why it appears this way on our decision tree. Now, if your spouse's income is greater than $20,000, your spouse's income, when you file your taxes married and jointly or use revised pay as you earn, is going to impact your income-driven repayments in all of the income-driven repayment plans. So whether if you file married and jointly or you use revised pay as you earn, your payments are based on household income. So you want to also take a look at what's my payment going to be like if I base it only on my own income. And in that case, you're going to be considering two of the other income-driven repayment plans. I'm showing pay as you earn here, which is going to be available to everyone as long as you were taking out all of your federal student loans on or after October 1st of 2007. Or if you had federal student loans before that date, October 1st of 2007, then you're only allowed to use income-based repayment. So if you have a spousal income of more than $20,000, you'll want to take a look at what your payments and forgiveness would look like if you filed your taxes married and separately and used one of these two plans based on when you took out your loans. So again, pay as you earn is the one you'll want to use if all your loans were taken after October 1st, 2007. If you have older federal student loans, you got to use income-based repayment on all of your loans. That's a slightly higher monthly payment. And so you'll want to compare that with what repay might look like based on your profile. I know I'm getting into the weeds here with strategy, but we'll get into some numbers here shortly, and we'll actually go through the calculator. So if your payments are going to be lower, filing your taxes separately and using pay as you earn or income-based repayment, and it doesn't negatively impact your tax filing, you can go ahead and do that. Otherwise, if you're comfortable with what revised pay as you earn looks like, even filing married and separately or married and jointly, then you can proceed with that plan. That's the, from an administrative tax standpoint, simplest route to go. But those who have higher income earning spouses, but also have high levels of student loan debt, often it makes sense to file your taxes married and separately, isolate your own income, keep your payments lower, maximize public service loan forgiveness. So again, I'll get into a case study with our calculator here that demonstrates that in more detail. Let's talk about qualifying employers for a moment. It's any federal, state, or local government or agency. So we've estimated that there are about 22 million qualified jobs in the United States today. Also, if you're directly employed by any 501c3 nonprofit organization, there are about 13 million of these jobs, according to the National Bureau of Labor Statistics. About 13 million of these jobs in the United States today. Hospitals are often 501c3 nonprofits if they employ you directly. That's qualified employment. A lot of the charter schools that we're talking to are also 501c3 nonprofit organizations. And then if you're a public school or any state of Arizona, I'm in Arizona. And so the hospitals here are usually 501c3 employers, and certainly like the state of Arizona, public schools here, all PSLF qualified employers. As long as you're directly employed by them, if you're a 1099 contractor or not working full time, and that's your only qualified job, you wouldn't be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. An interesting stat here, which is really kind of why we exist. If you look at for jobs as an example on Indeed, the largest, as I understand it, jobs platform out there today, very few qualified employers actually mention PSLF as a benefit of working there. We've estimated that about 7% of PSLF qualified employers, when they're advertising jobs available with them, actually mention PSLF as a benefit of working there. So it's our desire to change that, particularly given the great benefit that exists now from PSLF with the overhaul having taken place. But I want to now talk about individual borrowers' eligibility for PSLF, even if you have the right kind of loans, are using the right kind of repayment plan, i.e. an income-driven repayment plan, and you're working full-time for a qualifying employer. Not all of these individuals are eligible for PSLF because the requirement is that you pay based on your income for 10 cumulative years. Now, the CARES Act has helped this dramatically, because if you're working for a qualifying employer, right now, and since March 13th of last year, 2020, no one has to pay anything on their student loans. You have zero interest accruing and a zero payment required. That time does count towards public service loan forgiveness if the other requirements are in order. And so that is driving value for people working in nonprofit entities today. But there are a lot of folks still that are not eligible for PSLF because your payment stream is based on your debt to income ratio. We've found that most borrowers who have less than $25,000 of overall federal student loan debt, and certainly those who have private loans because they were never eligible for PSLF, are not PSLF candidates. Because if you think about it this way, if someone makes $50,000 per year, that's their salary as a teacher in Central California, just as an example, their income-driven repayment plan, and it is based on your family size because these payments are based on your discretionary income, their payment required on a monthly basis is $400 a month based on a $50,000 income, or we can even dial that down to say is $300 per month. So you're paying $300 a month based on a $50,000 income. Over the course of a year, that's $3,600 in payments. Over the course of 10 years, even if your income doesn't grow at all, that's $36,000 that you've paid in income-based payments, because your payments in an income-driven repayment plan are not based on how much debt you have. They're based on what your income is. So someone earning $50,000 a year pays $300 a month for 10 years. You're talking about coming out of pocket. If it's $300 a month, that's $36,000 in total over the course of 120 months. So if you only had $20,000 or $25,000 of student loan debt, you would have paid all your debt back doing those income-driven repayment plan payments. So technically you're qualified for PSLF, but when you do the math, you're actually not a PSLF candidate. That same individual working in that public school, or for any qualified employer that has $75,000 of student loan debt, has a payment trajectory of $36,000, and then the balance gets forgiven tax-free. So we want to make sure we understand not everybody's a PSLF candidate. It is based on your debt to income ratio. And in that case, the $50,000 income pays all the debt back for someone that has 25,000, anything less than 36,000 really, and then forgives an increasingly substantial amount for borrowers that have more debt than that. The higher the debt goes, the more incented you are, as you can tell, to work for a qualifying entity. And that's what we want to help you guys identify. So folks that are working in nonprofit entities full-time, If they have less than 25,000 in student loan debt, unless they have large family sizes and have been paying very little in an income-driven repayment plan, they're not going to be PSLF candidates. And again, we have a calculator for everyone to help figure this out. I don't want to rule anyone out. There are always exceptions. And then we also have a group, as we talk to employers through HR and other organizational representatives, we're learning that you've got a lot of individuals that have somewhere between, say, 25 and 30,000 up to 50 or $100,000 of student loan debt that are earning incomes in that realm as well. They have direct loans. They're using an income-driven repayment plan because they need the payment relief. They're participating in CARES Act right now, which means they're paying zero on their federal student loans. And so we call these folks eligible but unaware of their eligibility. We want to quickly help you identify if that's you, because if PSLF is going to save you substantial amounts of money and you already maybe even have some years complete towards it, we want to make sure we know exactly what that looks like and we're maximizing that savings opportunity. And then we've got, and it may be some of you who are already pursuing public service loan forgiveness. You've got a substantial amount of student loan debt. You've done these numbers. You know it's available to you, and you're trying to maximize the savings opportunity. You're already doing employment certification and getting a report back from the Department of Education saying you've made qualifying payments, and you just want to make sure you're doing everything right along the way. So those are sort of the three profiles. Again, to summarize, not eligible, and that's usually based on the debt to income ratio or having the wrong kind of loans or not working in public service. Eligible but not aware, we want to fix that. Eligible and pursuing, always working to maximize that savings opportunity. So if we talk about before the PSLF overhaul, and maybe I should just take a pause here because I've introduced some, we started to go into some case studies and what numbers might look like, but are there any specific questions that I can answer? Nick, I don't know if you are muted. I tried to shout out to you earlier, but I can try to unmute you if that's.
Can you hear me, Jason?
But are there any questions that I can answer for you guys now before I proceed?
Jason, can you hear me?
No, you're unmuted, buddy.
Jason, can you hear me?
Unless you've muted yourself. Okay. Oh, I'm the only one that can't hear Nick.
Jason, panelists can hear me? Can you hear me, Jason?
Let me change that. Nick, can you shout one more time?
Yes, Jason, can you hear me?
There he is.
All right, perfect. Thanks, guys. Thanks for bearing with us there real quick. I do have one quick question for you, Jason. Elizabeth here, she took out her loans in 1995 and was told that she was denied for the teacher's loan forgiveness program because the loans began, because that program began in 1996. Is there any sort of time frame for public service loan forgiveness and when you took out your loans?
Yeah, so the PSLF program was created in 2007. So any time spent in public service and paying on your student loans prior to the date specifically is July 1st of 2007 doesn't count towards public service loan forgiveness, but time spent after that does. So you may have had a student loan balance for many years. Likely you still have it now, and that's why you're here talking to us. That payment count would start in 2007 for you, and any payments, we haven't gotten into the overhaul yet because it's looser requirements for you specifically. But if you had the student loan debt while you were working for a qualified entity in 2007 or later, that's when your clock can start ticking towards loan forgiveness. I would maybe encourage you to listen to the overhaul part that I'm about to cover here before we go further to questions. But if that's helpful, we can hold off till then. But if there's something else, let us know now.
That was very helpful.
Okay.
And we can discuss a little more in-depthly into that after the Q&A section after the overhaul.
Sure. So the challenges that we'd seen in the media and that maybe some of you have faced were that, 99% of applications were being denied in the past 3 to 4 years. Most of that was around the fact that, the program was created in 2007, and then the government didn't nationalize student loans until July of 2010. If that's not already resonating to you as a date that's important for this, I'll say it again. July 1st of 2010 is from then till now is when everybody already had eligible loans. Most other people had an action plan. They needed to consolidate the FEL or the Perkins loans to make those loans eligible for PSLF. And the issue was loan servicers were not incented to encourage you to do that. So they were given bad advice. That has also been out in the media now and researched and otherwise penalized many servicers by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. But the overhaul ultimately addressed that if you didn't have the right kind of loans or you were steered towards the wrong kind of repayment plan, i.e. not an income-driven repayment plan, all of this stuff now qualifies on any of those federal student loans that previously weren't qualified. So what does the overhaul look like today? What's new? Any payments that you've made on those FEL or Perkins loans, and that's any payment, not an income-driven repayment plan payment. So if you were in forbearance or deferment and not in the military, that wouldn't count. But if you were making a payment on a graduated plan, on a 10-year plan, or any other kind of extended or regular repayment plan that wasn't income-based, that time now counts towards public service loan forgiveness. The one thing you have to do is consolidate those previously not eligible loans within the next, at the time it came out, year. Now it's basically 11 months. Our advice is to just do that now, and we'll show you the tool that you're able to do that through. So what's new is that any payment now on FFEL or Perkins loans counts towards PSLF. The stipulation is you must consolidate those loans to direct within the next 11 months. Who needs to consolidate their loans? If you currently have FEL or Perkins loans, you need to do it by 10/31/22. And again, our advice, as you see here, just do it now. Get it in line now. Get into the income-driven repayment plan that's most appropriate for you to drive savings. And then the last component of this, which I haven't really talked about yet, but this is where your employer's involved. And a lot of you, I think, that are joining this call this evening or this afternoon were invited from your employer, and you may even be bringing employment certification forms to your employer. What you want to do is, whether you've consolidated or not, maybe you're already pursuing public service loan forgiveness. You'll want to go to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Help tool, and that's simply at www.studentaid.gov/PSLF. So the studentaid.gov website /PSLF. That'll take you to the PSLF help tool. If you haven't used this before, it helps you pre-populate an employment certification form that you will then bring to the employer where you believe you have qualified public service time. And then that employer will complete that form, give it back to you, and you submit it to the Department of Education. It's a 3-step process there, if you will. So if you believe, for example, I forget the name, I think Elizabeth, you've started making payments in 2007 on FEL loans. It's probably FEL loans at that point. You want to consolidate those loans and you want to submit an employment certification form. You got it. That's the website, Nick. He just posted it in the chat function. The employment certification form, once completed by the employer where you believe you spent qualified time, the Department of Education, once you send that form in, will read back to you number of qualifying payments made on those loans. Now, if you'll have already direct federal student loans and you have the whole way through, and you don't need to consolidate, we still actually want you to fill out the employment certification form. Bring this to the appropriate HR representative at your organization. If you don't know who that is, let us know. You should have our contact information by the end of this thing, and we'll talk to your employer, because they get a benefit from this. If you're a student loan borrower working for a qualified employer and you can save money by working there, they should want to help you maximize this savings to retain you. And so it's an important consideration. No employer at a qualified employer should have someone there telling you, I'm not filling this out for you at this point in the game. We can help you fix that. But we want everyone by the end of the year to complete your employment certification forms. One, it gets an updated count based on the overhaul of qualified payments that you've made on all your loans, whether you have to consolidate or not. And then the second part of that is the Fed loans servicer, who's been the contracted servicer for public service loan forgiveness. They are getting out of the servicing game at some point next year. They've extended their, it was supposed to end December 14th of this year, but they extended it another year. If you're already pursuing this and you've seen Fed loans tell you that you're going to start working with Mohela or another servicer, that's the handoff process beginning. So don't be alarmed with that. But this is now a time to make sure that your statements are accurate and that you've got access to all the data, and that your loan servicers have your updated address and all that kind of stuff. Because when they hand you off to a new loan servicer, that loan servicer needs to get in touch with you and mail you appropriate documents, email you. You want to make sure that all of your contact information is updated with your loan servicer and with studentaid.gov. That is important. Those are important steps to take as we go into a new year of an evolving landscape with new loan servicers and everybody having to go back into repayment on February 1st. Be mindful that servicers are going to be changing soon. All your data needs to be up to date. There are some unknowns with all of this. We don't know what processing times are going to look like, which is why we're saying get those consolidation requests and those employment certification forms in sooner than later, even though you have 11 months to do all of this. We also don't know how long it's going to take for those servicers to transition to new servicers. So again, we want to make sure that you have all your documentation in with the current servicers and updated counts that are appropriate. We don't have access to your past employers. So Elizabeth, you worked for an organization in 2007 that was qualified for PSLF, and now you're somewhere else. You'll want to go back to that previous employer and certify those dates that you were employed there. Finding the person at that employer, if they're still, an ongoing concern, that is all work that you need to ultimately sort out. There's not a database for you specifically to figure your employment out, nor do we have access to that. So that is a step you need to take. In terms of the PSLF help tool to update for FEL loan processing, they're working on that now. So they'll direct you towards consolidating. You're going to want to consolidate FEL loans before you ask for payments to be qualified payments, a report to be made on those. And then incorporating future legislative changes in with the overhaul. The Congress is going through the negotiated rulemaking process right now to overhaul a lot of things related to higher education, of which public service loan forgiveness is also contemplated. So as I mentioned earlier, you guys are sort of grandfathered into the current programs if things change going forward. But if a new plan comes out that's more beneficial to you, or other changes are made, for example, the removal of tax liability on certain items. PSLF isn't taxable, but other income-driven plans are. You want to be aware of those and take advantage. And then also the CARES Act forbearance. Technically, CARES Act zero payments only qualify for PSLF if you were already enrolled in a qualifying repayment plan. So if they're going to enforce that, you may want to look at your student loan repayment plan right now. And if you, for example, just graduated in June of this year, right? You're still in your grace period, probably. You haven't made any qualified payments. You may want to indicate that you want to be in an income-driven repayment plan. Your payment will still be zero till February 1st when the CARES Act ends, but now you've indicated that you're in a qualifying repayment plan. So that's another unknown as well that we hope will work out to your favor. We've talked about employment certification. Again, if there's another takeaway from this discussion, it is that employment certification is not a mandatory thing for PSLF, but we think it's the most important requirement. You know, a lot of people have high levels of student loan debt and use income-driven repayment plans anyway. They're becoming increasingly popular. If you don't do that employment certification form, it would be very difficult as servicers continue to change and otherwise for you to document your payment progress along the way. We want you to do this annually. And so you bring it to HR or other authorized official at your employer. You complete that form, which says that you are a PSLF candidate and that you've worked at this qualifying entity full-time from X date to X date. And then they read a report back to you that says they deliver a summary, a payment summary that shows the qualifying payments that you've made along the way. I have a sample of that here, but your loan servicer will show you a chart of payments, qualified payments already made. So you definitely want to be using the employment certification form annually. Here's an example of qualified payments delivered from, in this case, Fed Loans Loan Servicing, showing that this individual has made 59 qualifying payments and has 61 to go. So really hard to take this program away from you when you've got this kind of documentation from the Department of Education's contracted servicer. So that's the employment certification form. Again, the best way to pre-populate this is through the PSLF help tool. Nick showed you this earlier. And in terms of utilization statistics, I think this is really interesting, is that we were going to see PSLF grow in terms of success and forgiveness granted substantially anyway, without the overhaul. Cumulative borrowers in PSLF are about 1.2 million, and it's about $123 billion of federal student loan debt that's represented. So the average borrower pursuing PSLF has 99,000 in federal student loan debt. There have been, it's now over 10,000 borrowers that have had their loans forgiven tax-free through PSLF. With the overhaul, that adds another 30,000. So we're at 40,000 borrowers, which equals now $3 billion of public service loan forgiveness granted or about to be granted to qualified borrowers. So the shoe has dropped. That stuff about, you know, the PSLF applications being denied, and we're really going to see exponential growth in PSLF here in the coming years. So let's do a case study here to put some context to this in terms of actual numbers. Now, in this individual's case, it was 95,000 of student loan debt. We're going to assume that they had $15,000 of undergrad debt in 2006. So those were probably FFEL loans, FFEL loans, not direct. And then a master's degree that was completed more recently with direct loans. The total is 95,000 in federal student loan debt. That 10-year standard payment's like $1,100 per month. Their salary is $55K, and they've been working full time for 2 years with a qualifying employer. So our PSLF salary boost calculator will estimate, based on all of this data, that our analysis suggests that you can save from public service loan forgiveness. The extent of that savings is $90,000, just over $90,000, which makes their $55,000 salary effectively worth another $14,000 or close to $70,000 per year. Employers love to see this articulated this way, because by working for them, a qualified employer, you're getting an effective boost to your salary, because to pay this $95,000 back at $1,100 a month over 10 years is going to cost something in the realm of $125,000 to $130,000. And so your income-driven payments are going to be much, much less than that. In fact, the number is the $55,000 income in revised pay as you earn. So assuming maybe this person was single with no dependents, If you're have a larger family, these payments are going to go down, but it's $350 a month versus $1,100. So over 10 years, I'm sorry, 8 years, because they've already completed 2 years towards this. They're coming out of pocket only $38,000, which, as I said, over 10 years to pay that debt back would cost at a minimum $130,000. So the savings again gets to that $90,000 number. And in this case, and our calculator does this for you as well, we're going to identify, are your loans already qualified? If that's the case, you're going to have a green light. Here, this person has a yellow light. Why? Because they have those old FFEL loans that need to be consolidated by 10/31/2022. So we direct you to the place where you can consolidate those loans. No surprise, it's the PSLF help tool with studentaid.gov. But we're giving you clear, concise action items here, if in fact they're necessary. Showing you the qualifying loans and are you in a qualifying repayment plan. Some borrowers are not going to be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So think about an individual who borrowed let's say it's only $30,000 that they borrowed. I hesitate to say only because that's a lot of money, but in the grander scheme of things, student debt levels at that level are not best suited for public service loan forgiveness if your income's high enough. So if someone's earning $75,000 a year and they've got $30,000 in student loan debt, I'll spare you the analytics. They're going to pay all that debt back based on their income in 10 years. We would rather see that person go to the private marketplace. Think SoFi, Common Bond, Laurel Road, Credible. The lending marketplace is really crowded right now. You guys are going to have to go into repayment on your student loans after the CARES Act on February 1st. So if the interest rates on your loans are 6% and you can secure 2.5% or 3% in the private marketplace, and you know you're not a PSLF candidate, now's the time to take action on that. And so we talk about refinancing as not so much the Webster's dictionary of it, but when you refinance your federal student loans in the student loan world, that means you're taking the federal status away and you're having some private lender like SoFi or Common Bond or Laurel Road or a host of other lenders that do this today. They write a check to the Department of Education or your loan servicer. They pay down your debt and now you've got a new loan. You're not eligible for the federal benefits anymore. So you certainly want to make sure that this is appropriate before you do it, but lower rates are available in today's unique rate, historical lows in the interest rate marketplace today. And if that's appropriate for you, now's a good time to take advantage of it. We talked about CARES Act a couple times here. Payments again are going to resume February 1st of next year. So we're only a couple months away from that. Now your income-driven repayment plan payments, if you're in one of those plans, are going to pick up there, or they're going to start there if you're getting into an income-driven repayment plan before payments kick back in, possibly as a result of this talk. But when it comes to recertification of income-driven repayment plans, so anytime you're using an income-driven repayment plan, if you're not already doing this, once a year, your servicers reach out to you to ask for updated income information. The best way to submit this, unless your income has gone down or you're not working, is to just upload your previous year's tax return. In this case, they haven't been asking for recertifications during the CARES Act. So if your income has gone up year over year, and the last time you recertified was based on your 2019 income, or some of you, it might even be the 2018 income, go ahead and let them use that. Don't recertify. In other words, if your income's higher now than it was in 2018 or 19, let them use the lowest payment possible if you're pursuing PSLF, or the lowest income documentation possible. So hopefully that makes sense. But you want to use the income documentation that's going to deliver you the lowest payment. And they are not. They understand that you'll do that. You don't want to lie to them in terms of lying about your dependents or saying you don't have access to your spouse's income. When you do, that stuff may get you in trouble in the underwriting process, but they are aware that you're going to use previous year's tax returns to set your payments for the next 12 months, and you should do that to your advantage. And then again, you want to make sure that all PSLF credit due from the pause period is also showing up on your account. That is also done through the PSLF help tool when you certify your employment. The zero payments that you've been making now should count and be part of that count. And, that's something that there's an unknown related to those that have recently graduated. We'll want to sort that out over time. So there's 5 minutes left here in terms of our allotted time. I know that, Nick, you've been answering questions along the way. I figured out my sound situation. So I'm glad that you were picking up there when prompted. If you're a PSLF candidate, you can post your job seeker profile for free at Jobs. The link is here. We'll also send you a follow-up email that has all these links. If you go to PSLFjobs.com and say, take me to the jobs board, you can create an account as a job seeker. It's free. We are increasingly having recruiters looking at these profiles, but we also have 14,000 jobs on the platform now. So we encourage you to create a job seeker profile. We're only going to be growing this in the near term, but there's already 14,000 jobs listed there that we know are PSLF qualified. And then if you want to calculate your PSLF salary, the coupon code to bypass the $30 payment for the analytical tool is forgiveness, all lowercase. So I'm typing it in the chat field as well.